Industry. This is specifically going to be looking more and more at the north in the United States. Also note that we're jumping back to chapter 17, business and labor in the industrial era. So we are now in the time of the Gilded Age, looking at 1870 through 1900. There's a lot of changes going on in this time period. Some can be considered good, some can be considered bad. But we can say one of the biggest changes that occurs during this time period is that the United States is really going to change from being a predominantly agriculture nation to the world's foremost industrial power. And you can see that on this chart, how like agriculture, if you're watching it go down percentage-wise, you can see just from 1880 through 1910, how it is now below like the industry and services when it comes to the United States. Services I don't really talk about here, but that's things like hairdressers, teachers. You can see that that's predominantly what America does today and everything. Anyway, giving you some other numbers besides this chart, you can we're going to see that about 1/3 of the world's manufactured goods is actually going to be produced in the United States by 1900. Early 20th century factory workers are going to make up about 1/4 of the workforce, so no small amount. And in agricultural workers during this time period, you can see go from about 1/2 to less than 1/3. Now, when we're looking at all this, we have to look at all these different industries, and some of these industries were not even known before the Civil War, such as like petroleum, steel, and meat packing. We're also going to see that while the number of people working in industry increases, the actual number of firms in industry is actually going to shrink at this time due to things like mergers and changes of corporate management and organization of workforce. And so what this means is we're having very few companies control vast amount of economic wealth in the United States. This is when you're seeing the idea of more and more monopolies and everything. Before I get into all of the industries though, we have to look at technology. Technology really plays a huge role in transforming factory work, as also it's going to really increase the scale of production. This is going to be things like technological innovations in steam engines, and then later on you get like electricity. And so this is going to free up a lot of manufacturers from dependency on water power. Now they can build their mills basically anywhere that has an accessible transportation system and a concentration of labor to work in their mills. We're also going to see with technological developments, mechanization. Mechanization is really important because it's something that really affects America all the way to today. Basically, it's substituting machines for manpower. The thing is, prior to having a machine that can do work for men, that means different mills and industrial corporations and stuff need a lot of men. And that actually gives power to the workers, because if you're needed, you can start saying, well, I want you to pay me more, and they need you, so they're willing to do so. However, with mechanization and machines replacing men, this skews workplace power away from actual laborers. It's also going to transform city life when we're looking at technology. So it's things like all kinds of new conveniences, from electric lights and appliances and store-bought food, making life technically easier. But also we're seeing new forms of entertainment with electric trolleys connecting people more, electric streetlights, meaning you can stay out later, amusement parks, movies, things like that. The thing is, when we look at technology, though, in the United States, for much of the 19th century, the United States had actually been a borrower of innovation. A lot of the technological improvements during like the Industrial Revolution specifically came from Great Britain and Germany. However, by the late 19th century, I should say, and really by the 1900s, the United States is going to be joining their ranks of being a technological innovator. So giving you an idea of how much innovation is going on in the United States. In 1910, the United States hits the mark of 1 million patents have been issued. Ooh, 1 million patents. The thing is, 900,000 of them, so 90% of these patents, had been issued after 1870. A great example, though, of how technology is changing innovation such in this time period is looking at the relationship between science and technology. So the thing is, before the late 19th century, when you're looking at advances in scientific theory, generally it follows the technological innovation. A great example of this is like making steel. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know all of the science behind making steel, but let's put it this way. Basically, the first time people made steel, it was basically a historical accident. And then they continued doing that process because they realized it worked. But they didn't understand scientifically why it worked. So much later on, scientific theory explains that making steel is by carbonizing different elements within the steel and the impurities. And like I said, I'm not going into all of the science behind it. So they explain why it happens later. But by the late 19th century, we're switching those two roles. We're getting the scientific theory before the innovation. And a great example of this is specifically pictured here, Thomas A. Edison's practical electrical light bulb. The thing is, by this time period, there was already a theoretical understanding of electricity. They knew that if electricity, you had an electrical current that goes through a filament in a vacuum, this makes a light. I don't know about you guys. I know I did this as an experiment with like a baby jar in like 6th grade, but I don't think they do that anymore. Maybe because they realized it was really dangerous. The problem was it doesn't last very long. The filament burns out really fast and wham and done. Edison manages to make his light bulb last longer. And with that success, this touches off a whole wave of like research and development all around the world. Because it's great, if you can make it last, that's awesome. But what you really need is to make it last, and you need to make it last cheaply and efficiently. And that actually ends up falling to Elihu Thomson, who was a high school chemistry teacher in Philadelphia, who left his job full-time to become a researcher. And he actually had his own company, but would actually go on to purchase Edison's General Electric Company in 1892. And the thing is, Elihu Thomson is going to basically establish the country's first corporate research and development division. And this technological department is going to produce the most efficient light bulb design. And it's so efficient and so cheaply made that by 1914, General Electric is producing 85% of the world's light bulbs. Talking about those monopolies, we're going to come back to later. Other companies are going to follow this precedent. They're going to start making their own research and development laboratories that help companies from Standard Oil to DuPont to U.S. Rubber to Kodak. And a lot of these industries who put their money into scientific development are going to end up being leaders in their industries around the world. So this process of invention that we're seeing in this technological process of invention is really going to give the United States a commanding technological lead. The thing is, industries needed to be efficient because now they can apply that technology and expand out, not just across the United States, but beyond the borders of the United States. But this is going to have drastic effects because now they have to expand their workforces. They have to expand out and have, more mills and they're reaching a larger population, and this means the need for capital is also expanding. And we see changes in corporate management in order to gain that capital. And so we're going to see some changes in society at this time because of technology really pushing off a lot of this.